right. Hey, Dad.
Hello?
Say hi to your descendants.
Hi, everyone.
All right. Well, tell us your full name and your date of birth and where you were born.
Okay. Arthur John Swanson the second, named after my grandfather, my father's father.
Is there officially a the second in your name or your birth certificate?
There was early on. I
Ah.
sort of dropped it. Uh, but yes. Um, Born in New York City uh, in September 12th, 1953.
All right. And any significance to your name other than it was your grandfather on your dad's side?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my parents had a deal that my father got to name the first child, and then my mother named the next two,
Ah.
and so he got to call me after his father, and then Mom I think picked to me better names of Lisa and Eric, but Arthur has been a distinguishing name. People.
Yes, King Arthur, the sword and the stone. You know that story?
Yes, I do. But um, yeah. So my father's father was a carpenter, and my father, I guess, wanted to carry on the tradition of the name.
All right. And was your grandfather Arthur John?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you know about your grandparents?
Sure. My father's side, they mostly lived in like Illinois. They were farmers in
Mm-hmm.
Illinois, and then at some point moved to Southern California, like Burbank area, and had my father and his sister Shirley, who sadly died of an overdose, probably in her 30s or 40s maybe. Um, so they lived in Southern California. And then my father, I guess when he was about 21, he had gone to art school in California. And at the time, New York City was sort of the mecca of the art world, so he left everyone, his family, and everyone there to start his art career in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Yeah, I and then on my mother's side, my mother, her father, and my her my mother's mother was apparently an orphan, so we don't know too much about her. She apparently lived. She was somewhere from southern Italy, and my grandfather was from northern Italy. They met. They married when she was, I don't know. Lisa says 14 years old, in Italy. They came to the, well. Lisa says they actually were already here, but anyway they met. So then they had three children. Um, an Uncle Sam, Uncle Joe, and and my mother, um,
Gloria,
and
formerly
my
known as
mother. Right,
Gloria.
originally called named Gloria. Yeah.
Gloria
So
Paisano.
so the Uncle Sam was he had wound up having four children himself. They lived in New Hyde Park. We visited them frequently growing up. Um, Sadly, my Uncle Joe, who was my closest to my mother, died in the war in World War II, um, and then my mother. Um, eh, let's see, what else? What would you?
No, this is good. One thing I was curious about back to your dad's side.
Mm-hmm.
What is the heritage of the grandparents that you know of or
Okay.
of that
Mm-hmm.
side? Because Italian is on the mom's side.
Right.
What do you
Yeah.
know about the heritage
So
of the Illinois
yes,
side?
my grandfather was Swedish, and that's where Swanson
Uh
is
huh.
from, and my grandmother's name was Snyder, so she was German.
Uh
So
huh.
those were the so it's like a quarter Swedish, quarter German, and
Uh huh.
half Italian.
Right. Wasn't there some Pennsylvania Dutch in there? Is that the
I've heard
German or
that. Yeah,
we
that's
don't
maybe
know?
that's it could be part of that. I think a lot of Germans live there. So,
Okay.
um, but
All right. Great. How did your parents meet?
um, so my father came to this New York. I guess found a place of his own. Um, apparently they a mutual friend a mutual I think well wait, let's see. It was a friend of my father's, I think, who somehow, I guess, a friend who knew both people, an acquaintance, I guess, who knew both of them, suggested that they meet. They thought, both my parents were actually quite attractive at the time, and they were very, very much into their own looks. I think. My mother did model some. My father was sort of weightlifted and was in, so they were both in very good physical condition, and they made a handsome couple. Um, they met through, it was actually, it was a friend of, I guess it was some friend of both of them. Um, and apparently they were very different from each other, as you can imagine. An Italian woman growing up in New York, and a German Swedish gentleman father, growing up in Southern California. But I think it was part of the attraction was that I think they were physically attracted to each other, and just they were both like sort of lively, fun people, and I think guess they hit it off pretty quickly. I think they got married within a year. Uh, um, yeah, and yeah.
And when did Grandma change her name from
Ah,
Gloria
mhm.
Paisano to Dale Meadows?
Good question. Good. I think that was before my father uh, came and met her. Uh, yeah, my mother wasn't that. She was, I don't know, a little embarrassed about being Italian, I guess, and wanted to be more waspy, I guess, and changed her name from Gloria Pisano to Dale Meadows as a model. That was the name she used, but then she used Dale, I think, from then on. But her mother called her Gloria for her whole life.
Uh huh.
She didn't really accept the name change.
What were some of? Oh, so I'm so slow down. What were some of your mom's best dishes that she cooked?
Mm.
I didn't prep you for any of these questions, but
Okay.
I was just thinking about it because we ate lasagna the other night, and I was like, I bet there's some good Italian hand-me-down recipe that we don't have.
Well, I think we do
That
have the
Lisa
lasagna.
has.
I think we do have the lasagna
Lasagna.
recipe. I think I even tried to make it once or twice, and I think it came out okay.
I'd like to try that.
That was one of her, I guess, specialty dishes.
Yes.
She did like to make that. She did cook. She cooked pretty much every night for us. We had a hot meal every night. We would eat as a family. That seemed to be important to both of them. They even, which I thought was kind of cool in its day, we we they bought a round table to eat on, to sort of signifying equality. I guess they wanted so that the children that we didn't have parents at the heads of the table.
Oh, they made a conscious decision to do that.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Nice.
I think that's her main dish that I, you know, that I could remember. We used to go over to the cousin's house almost maybe every week, every other week, or they would come to our house for uh, usually Italian meals, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes other. Uh, so we spent all the holidays together as well.
Nice.
And then my father's parents who were still living in California, they came to visit maybe once or twice a year. Usually they would drive there.
Wow.
Hard to imagine. I think my father's mother was sort of afraid of flying, so. But they would usually come. We didn't go out to see them very much that I could remember, but they came to us. I think almost at least once a year.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Cool. And then you grew up in Long Island.
yes.
So they met in New York City. They moved out to the burbs.
Yes. So this is one of these white privilege situations
Okay.
that I was unaware of at the time. So after the World War II, they had very affordable housing for the veterans, but not necessarily the black veterans. It was almost all white veterans who got housing in Hicksville area. That's where we started, and lived there I think till I was about 7, and then we moved to a place called Laddingtown, which is on the North Shore. It's quite beautiful there. About when I was about 7, and started going to school in Locust Valley High School from then on.
Let's backtrack for a
Yeah.
second. So your father was a veteran.
He was.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So he was a pharmacist mate. He in the Navy. I guess he didn't really want to. I think he didn't really want to shoot anybody, so I think he wanted to find a way to be in the Navy and not have to fight. But he did say they were shot upon, which is pretty scary since they didn't really have any.
And this is World War II.
Yeah, this was he was on a hospital ship in the Pacific.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was what he did. He learned a lot from that. He thought about being a doctor at one point after doing that, but he was always like the best artist in his school. He said that sometimes he actually wouldn't like he thinks that it impaired his learning because everything that came up they would ask them to draw a picture of whatever while they were busy like learning the material. So he was very talented and just very interested in it. He just loved drawing, and so he was, I guess, quite exceptional at a early age. But he also loved it. So it's easy to do something that you love. I think. Easy to be good at it when when it's so motivating.
Right. Okay. So, artist, veteran, painting the picture. Okay. So now you're in Long Island. He got veteran housing, white veteran housing. So you learned about this after the fact that there were black veterans that did not get the same opportunities.
I did only like in the last couple of years too. I was aware of this, that the black veterans were pretty much, they found ways to exclude them from this housing, because I never saw any black people
so you grew up in a segregated neighborhood.
Which is very sad.
Many of us did.
Very sad. But again, I think, and this has to do with like a white privilege, like he was allowed to get off to a good start. Like he was able to buy a house at a reasonable price and accumulate money, and that allowed us to move to Laddingtown and so forth. We moved to that Laddingtown. My father designed the house in Laddingtown. It was a redwood house. It was beautiful,
Ship that wood out from
I
California.
guess there was, yeah. And my grandfather, who was a carpenter, and also he and my father, built a lot of it. I mean, they had a contractor, but they did a lot of stuff themselves on the
Mm-hmm.
house. Eh, it was in a, it was a, that was like a, wasn't gated, but it was like a private area in Laddingtown. There were also like a lot of famous people in that area. There was Berlitz, who was uh, the I don't know if they're the foreign language people. They very well, at least in that day, they were very well known
Mm.
foreign language company. There was this Tony Murata, who was the inventor of the subway, the the hero sandwich.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the subway system. Okay,
No, the
the
hero sandwich.
sandwich guy.
And
Okay.
other famous people in that very nice area. I wasn't honestly that happy there. It was kind of secluded.
Mhm.
Um, there were only there was only like one other kid on my block,
Mhm.
um, and then with my sister. So you had to kind of travel even to just be with other kids.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I mean, it was beautiful. It had its own beach, private beach.
Wow. The
Yeah.
house
No,
was right
no,
on
I'm
the water.
sorry.
No, the
The
town.
area, that private area
Oh, it was a
had
little
its own
private area. Okay.
beach, which was quite nice. So my father was doing well in the art world, um,
Doing like commercial art or.
mostly commercial.
Mhm.
Yeah, he did a lot of book covers. He did uh, like paintings. So he would do some also just sort of abstracts and things that he did have several exhibits of his work. He was commissioned once by the Air Force to go just basically all over the world, and uh, he did paintings based on those travels for the Air Force Academy in Fort Collins or something.
Hmm.
So he was very successful as an artist.
It's really amazing. He raised a family of three on doing art.
He did. He did, because my mother wasn't working at that point.
Yeah.
So it was him. Um, yeah, although, according to my mother, he didn't make enough, which began to be a problem for the family.
Uh huh.
Um,
Tell us. Tell us about your siblings.
okay.
We haven't gotten the overview yet.
Yes, okay. So, obviously, well, not obviously, I was the first. I was born maybe a year or so after they were married. Um, um, I feel like I got all of their attention, especially my mother's attention, for about 18 months. I think I had a good bonding experience with her in those early years, in a couple. And then Lisa was second. Eh, and she, also I think my mother was really attentive to both of us, really, for, pretty long, for a period up until I was about 5, I guess, when our youngest brother Eric was born, who was severely retarded. It wasn't. We didn't know for sure at birth. You know, he seemed a little slow developmentally over time, but it was hard to know. And then, very sadly, he fell down a flight of stairs at one point and hit his head, and it's just not known whether or not that had an effect on his mental abilities, or it may not have had any influence. But it's hard to know. But so he was severely retarded, so he couldn't speak or understand. Like I think he knew, kind of recognized us, like, but otherwise he really was, uh, very limited in
Yeah.
terms of what he could do. Um, which changed everything, honestly.
Yeah, it must have been very sad.
Yeah, very sad for everyone. I think my mother in particular. I think it was a real stress on her to try to, because I think my father, he did work a lot, and that was kind of, he saw traditionally sort of more, that was his thing. He would work, bring in money, and she would be responsible for the three of us. The first two I think weren't that high maintenance, but having Eric became, a real really hard on her.
Mm-hmm.
And hard on my sister, honestly. I think that once he came, like my sister really, sort of that middle, like Ryan, that's sort of the middle child syndrome, where once Eric came, so I had that first 18 months. I think that were great, and then Lisa had this brief period with me, and then Eric came. So she never really had time to herself, like with my mother, and my father was like not that involved with us really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was friendly and everything, but he didn't really. I don't think he did much childcare or anything. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that became a real stress, especially on my mother. At that time, the schools didn't take any responsibility for, a child like that. So, he stayed at home, I think, for his first at least 5 years. And then 5 or 6, he went to a private school in Pennsylvania that was just for kids like him. And we used to visit there at least every other week, I think, to see how he was doing and so forth. It was a nice school, actually, but we had to pay out of pocket for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think he went to another school, and he wound up going to different places.
But he wasn't capable of learning much.
No.
So he just kind of lived there.
Yeah, I guess the idea was to just try to keep him happy, feed him and, make sure he was, his personal comforts were taken care of. He wasn't even toilet trained for a pretty long time, but eventually he was.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was involved with that a lot with him. Like I think it's part of what sort of I think sort of made me interested in helping others, because I was helping with Eric from pretty early on.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes to my own detriment. I think I did it too much. But I learned. I feel like I learned empathy, from him.
Mm-hmm. You told me to keep it light, but life has light and dark in it. We can't.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No. That's part of the world. That's part of the story.
Right? That's your story. Do you have any memories of good experiences with either of your siblings? Like a story you could share about you and Lisa, or you and Eric?
Yeah. Well, actually, so we're in this beautiful house in Laddingtown, but it was a large. I think we lived on 2 acres of land, and it was, I think, probably expensive to live there.
Mm-hmm.
And that become became a bit of a stress, as well as having Eric and paying for his schooling and so forth. So I think there were a lot of things weighing on my parents. So when I was about 12 and Lisa was 10, this is sort of this.
I was going to ask about this.
I mean, this was unbelievable what I don't know how they decided to do this. In some ways, I've always admired them for doing what they did. They basically said, screw it, let's sell the house and go to Europe, you know? And my mother was on board with that. So we went for 9 months. We went to Europe, part of the Middle East, a little of North Africa. We drove all over the place for this 9-month period. We didn't really have an agenda. Like, sort of roughly, we kind of knew what places we wanted to hit, but there was no real timetable. So we spent like a month in a villa in Terracina in Italy. We skied in Kitzbühel, Austria for 2 weeks. And, we stayed at a castle in Scotland. I mean, that was an unbelievable trip, I have to say. We missed, Lisa and I missed most of I was in 7th grade and she was in 5th grade at the time. We missed most of our school year. But we did have our books, and we had some tutoring even before we went, and then came back, and I think I did some tutoring with in my math and science, and we both passed all our classes because we got back in time for the finals, and it passed, and I probably did about as well as I would have done even if I'd been there all year, because I wasn't an outstanding student, I don't think, at the time. So, and in some area, like in social studies, which really interested me, I was actually ahead of the class.
Because you were learning firsthand.
Yes, many things.
Some world history.
But I guess it really was, that was probably the best period for our family. We basically were in this Volkswagen that we bought over there. It was a brand new Volkswagen, like a station wagon, I guess. And Lisa and I were sitting in the back seat, basically spending hours together, driving all over the place, and we were so close during that whole time. We used to play games together. We used to we would do each other's hair, just I was there. That was very special, and everybody was close during that period. So I would say really the best time in our family. With Eric, honestly, I have to think, about things most of it was hard, I think. I think it was just hard on everyone.
Yeah, you couldn't really connect with him.
Yeah. One of the things was kind of, for whatever reason, when we were in Europe, we would walk in two groups. My father and sister would walk. They walk faster than us, so they would be in the front, and my mother and I would be in the back, trailing.
Two different walking paces.
Yeah.
Sim and I have that.
Yeah.
Sim's always 5 feet ahead of me.
Yeah, right. So he could walk with Mona.
Yeah, exactly. We're on the turtle crew.
So that would be the best time with maybe the whole family, really, honestly.
It sounds like an amazing trip. I'm inspired. I want to do something like that. Well, let's take a drink. Water break. Okay, you kind of answered this, but what's something you're grateful for about your childhood?
I did appreciate sort of the spontaneity and uh, yeah. I mean, I think my parents were sort of unconventional in their own way. In my father being an artist, that seemed to come natural for him. But my mother had that sort of creative streak too, and I appreciated that. Uh, One of the things my mother said to me, which doesn't seem like what you typically hear from a parent, was, "Don't be a Boy Scout. Like, 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 don't be too good. Like, don't like, oh, you know that." Uh, so I appreciated that um, they were different. I think in a certain way, and it, it made it sort of fun. They were fun in that way.
We're going to move forward into your adult life.
Okay, let me just
Okay, what else?
I'll tell you one other thing about this, because I almost feel like the Europe trip was sort of the beginning of the end for my parents.
Okay.
That, you know, so we came back. We wound up buying a house that was half the price of the one we lived in Locust Valley, in the town of Locust Valley, and we continued to go to Locust Valley High School. So that was okay, and actually it was a nice house, and the school was nice and good. But there were still these tensions, I think, between my parents about many things. I think my mother wound up starting to work. I think first as a secretary, and then eventually she went into industrial real estate, which is mostly a man's business. So she spent, she was in a different world. And I think my mother, she's very smart. Growing up in a traditional Italian family, I think it would, really wasn't viewed as that she would be one to go to college, even though she was the brightest one in the family. And I think that's always been a frustration for her, that she. So I think she didn't. Between my brother and I think her feeling unfulfilled in certain ways, she began working, but also I don't know, met other men, I guess, who were different, like probably actually more traditional than my father, and because there were other tensions, she began like coming home late at night, and it was clear that she was sort of disenchanted with him, and it affected obviously affected us. So it was soon after, probably like within a year after we got back, that happened, and it went on really for like 10 years. My mother was kind of distanced then from the rest of the family.
But you all still lived under the same roof.
For a while, yeah. She might have moved out, like by the time I was like going off to, like maybe or maybe before I went to college. I think she may have moved out. But my father always lived at home, first with my sister and me, and then basically with my sister when I went away. I mean, it's one of the things I felt like that for whatever reason, I feel like I had this self-protective, instinct to just get away from them, like because there was a lot of discord, and I just wanted to get away. First, I went to the University of Rochester, that gave me like maybe like a 4/5 like funding, like scholarship and financial aid, so it was nearly free. I did that for 2 years. I did very well there, and then transferred to Duke, and um, and then you know. I was interested in psychology. I had heard that clinical psychology, like nobody gets into clinical psychology graduate school, which I took as sort of a challenge. So it was actually a good motivator for me, that I felt like, well, I think I could do this. So I was very, very motivated to try to get into graduate school in clinical psychology, from freshman year. Um, and I did, obviously. Um, so I got full funding at University of Missouri for graduate school, so I didn't actually have to pay anything to go there.
Who was Arthur John Swanson in high school? And tell us about a few of your high school friends, because I know you kept in touch with a few high school friends your whole life.
I did, and yes. So I was, I think, well liked. I was. I honestly, I've always felt that I had like an attention deficit at some level. I didn't really. It was hard for me to focus in school, like for more than even one period. Usually, my favorite class was gym. Uh, um, so I did okay in school. I think I could have done better if I'd been more focused, and I guess motivated at the time. But again, I was well liked. I ran twice for to be president of the class, and won easily both times. So I was a bit of an enigma in that way, because I was well liked, but um, I didn't I didn't really date during that, at that time. I don't know, for whatever reason, I felt sort of insecure in that area. Uh, um, Seemed like the young women I was interested in didn't seem to be interested in me. That I do know there were some women interested in me, but I don't know, for some reason, that didn't happen. Uh, um, I played sports. I actually did wrestling in junior high school, and then I played baseball, and I started tennis like in my junior year, and played that for 2 years, and wound up being the captain and most valuable player of the tennis team. And baseball was probably the thing I loved the most. Um, I was good in baseball, but I honestly, I would get anxious, I guess, in certain situations, which I think impaired my ability. Um,
What positions did you play?
so mostly second base and pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of my biggest regrets in life was that in my senior year, my friend Elliot, who was also on the team, who was like a spare outfielder, decided that he wasn't going to go out for our senior year, and he told me, and he I don't know why, but he asked me. He asked me. He said, "Well, I don't know." Somehow convinced me that I shouldn't go out either, and I allowed it. And so I would have been a starting pitcher in my senior year, because I knew I was better than all but one other pitcher there. And for some bizarre reason, I agreed with him. I told the coach, and the coach. I mean, this is one of these things where the coach didn't say anything. He didn't why are you doing this? I know you love, And my parents too, honestly, nobody really questioned it. It just happened. Um, and at the time, I was playing more tennis, and like I actually thought, well, maybe if I play more tennis, practice tennis in the spring, that I'll play maybe in college or something. But that didn't happen. Uh, so that was a big regret I had in high school. And my friend Elliot, who sadly died a couple of years ago, um, I went up to visit him, and it's one of the things he said to me was he said that he apologized to me for like convince me to to not go out for in our senior year because he knew it was a bad choice, especially for me. Um, but I did have these. I had several good friends. Elliot was one of them. He lived in the town next to me, and we played all kinds of sports together. And um, it was fun. It was always we always had fun playing. We played just about every sport, and Brian, who is I'm still close with. I play golf with Brian regularly. Um,
Last names?
yeah, so Elliot Pagliaccio and Brian Boyajian. Uh, so Brian lives out in East Northport now. Um, he was the best man at our wedding. Um, he he was more. I didn't actually play his sports with him as much because he was a big soccer player and I didn't play soccer. Um, but we went to this fishing camp together. It was part of the boys' club up in New Brunswick, Canada, and I became friendly with him through that and other things in high school. So those were my two closest friends, and uh, I was pretty much close with, especially with Brian, really, to this day. Uh, Elliot and I probably had a little falling out, maybe I don't know, 10 years ago or so. But he also had a falling out with his own brother, and I don't know, different things were happening. Um, um, Anything else about high
That's
school?
good. I think there was. You used to play pool with your dad?
I did. Yeah, I remember we had a big. We used to keep track of like the score of our wins and losses, and it would be like 300 to 299. So we were pretty evenly matched. The pool table was in my father's studio, so that was fun to do that. Um,
Do you call it pool or billiards?
Pool, yeah.
I don't know
Um,
what the difference is.
um, and sometimes I used to just like I was interested in my father's work. Sometimes I just sit there and watch him paint, and just talk to him about different things.
Mm.
Um, Um, I mean, otherwise in high school, like I said, I didn't really date very much. Uh, um,
Who was your first love?
um, was actually a woman named Susan who was a friend of the family who took care of Eric. She was like when he wasn't. I guess when he wasn't in a school, like in the summer, like she would stay at our house and take care of Eric. Um, and she was a year older than me, and I became quite. I was very attracted to her. She was a year older. I feel like she never really. I mean, I think when kids are young, like a year old, the year difference like sort of matters to people.
So did you just have a big crush on her, or you guys dated?
Um, well, we didn't really date. We just sort of hung out. One time, I mean, she did. She was attract. She did like me as well. At one time, we went up to this at Canada to go fishing, and I invited her to go, and she said no. So then we get all the way up to New Brunswick, Canada, and somehow Susan changed her mind and came up to New Brunswick by herself, like somehow hitchhiking and like going through the woods and like finding us in a cabin in New Brunswick. So
Okay, so she
she
did like you back.
she did. I mean, I don't know. She didn't realize that she liked me. But yeah, so it was sort of. It seemed like sort of unrequited most of the time, and then she got into some weird stuff with, I don't know, this Indian, I don't know, shaman thing or something, which I just thought was too weird for me. Um, so, we sort of went on different directions. But later on in life, she sort of came around back to me. But that was too late. So,
You missed your chance.
she missed her chance, I would say.
Yes, all right, great. So you got through your high school years, graduated high school, had the instinct to leave. You got some good scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about working at Chick-fil-A.
Okay. So that was right after I graduated from Duke. I decided I wanted to take a year off between undergrad and graduate school, and so I was actually I had applied for a position as a psychiatric attendant at Duke in the inpatient unit at Duke Hospital, but there weren't any openings at the time, so I saw this opening for to be the assistant manager of Chick-fil-A, and applied and got that job, and actually had a good time. I was sort of had, I don't know, 2 or 3 employees, and ate Chick-fil-A every day, and
What was your favorite dish?
the chicken sandwich I liked, and there was a certain pie that I liked. I think it was a lemon pie or something. But anyway, so the guy who was the manager had gone to graduates. He had undergraduate in psychology. He had applied for graduate school and didn't get in anywhere. So here I was, basically doing what he tried to do, and not knowing, if I were going to get in. He liked me. At one point, he said, "Art, if you play your cards right, you could have your own Chick-fil-A one day." So, and as someone, my son Mike, said, I probably would have made a lot more money there than they would in my career, which I think is probably true.
What, owning a Chick-fil-A?
Managing like
Or-
a region of Chick-fil-A.
Especially if you get more up into the senior management area, levels. But anyway, so I enjoyed that. So it turned, eventually an opening occurred at Duke. They had told me that they really liked me, that they just needed to wait. They needed to wait for somebody to leave. So I got the first position that was open, and then I worked there probably for about a year, which was a great experience. It was really, basically, I was sort of helping with the psychiatric care of inpatients there, and working with psychiatrists and psychologists, and applied really all over the country for graduate school. And got a couple offers. The best one was at Mizzou, University of Missouri.
So then that brings you to Missouri.
Mm.
So tell us a little bit about graduate school, and also how you met Joan,
Okay.
Mike's mom and Luca's grandma.
So Missouri was great. It was, it was different for me. I'd never been there that before, but Columbia was actually a very nice city. It was, it was the biggest. It was like the main campus for Missouri, for university, and it just had a lot there. And there were only 7 of us accepted in this program, out of about 200 or something. Um, and I enjoyed that. It was stressful because I think if you got like 2 B's or something, you could be put on probation. So there was some pressure to perform, but I did well. I was very motivated and interested in the work. Psychology to me, those classes were always the most interesting, even not just clinical but social psychology, and so all of that sort of appealed to me. So I didn't find it hard to like study and learn. I had one supervisor actually became the dean of Furkhoff graduate school here, which is a huge job. He was my first supervisor at Missouri, and then my second one was a woman who she was going to become the editor of this journal of personality, clinical and personality personality psychology, which was the premier journal in psychology. She was and she was the one editing my work, and I really thank her more than anyone for like teaching me how to write. I mean, I've always was considered a good writer even earlier on, but she was amazing. Like she would write more than what I wrote, and just giving me suggestions about how to rephrase things, and so I give her a lot of credit and thanks to her. But very sadly, she died of I guess alcohol related. I don't know exactly what she died of, but it was alcohol related. She
died of too much alcohol.
She was probably 45 or so. Very sad. Yeah. But nobody knew anything about that, at the time. And I was at the time living with. First, I lived on my own for the first year, and then after that, I lived with John Sterling for about 4 years, who was also in the program in experimental psychology, and we got along great. It was really fun living with him. We had a lot of fun. We used to do like fun things together. We went on this. We went whitewater rafting in Arkansas. We joined a weightlifting competition. we did arm wrestling competition. There was a Missouri canoe race that we did together, and like just different things that it was fun to do stuff with him. So then I did have a job the first summer, even though I wasn't an undergrad. They hired me to be like a guide for the university, like for incoming freshmen, and one of the other guides was a guy. His name is Tim Kaine, who became governor of first mayor of Richmond, and then he became governor of Virginia, and he ran with Hillary Clinton for vice president. So I knew him there at Missouri He was like a really smart, nice guy, and yeah, and so I did find graduate school, and I enjoyed it, but it was like hard. I think doing like a dissertation, like it's hard to do, and it takes time. Um, so I did. It did. Let's see. What was it? I guess my fourth year. I yes. So I went to Rutgers with medical school for a internship, which was very good. I It was a good experience for me. Um, and then I went back to Missouri to finish my dissertation. I taught a couple classes to make some money so that when I was there, um, and then finished like in like something like March or something of '83, I think it was. Um, and then came back to New York, applied for jobs, it, and I think the best job that was available to me was at the Children's Village in Dobbs Ferry. There was the guy who's hired me as Charles Schaefer was a very well known sort of researcher and writer in psychology, and he liked me. He said, "You remind me of myself when I was younger," and so I started there in early '83.
What famous rapper did you work with at Children's Village?
Yes, DMX was actually in my unit. His name was Earl Simmons. This is common knowledge, so it's not confidential information. So his name was Earl Simmons at the time. Yeah, I did work with him. He was very bright, very like strong-willed guy. I think I could see. I think he had a drive to be successful. Like some kids, I think were sort of feel like almost started to give up, but you feel like he was motivated. So I worked with him, and there was about 60 kids or so in the about I think 5 cottages or something that I was responsible for as a psychologist. But then there were social workers and other people also working with them.
All right, I'm going to pause you here.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to take a break in the storytelling history, and we're going to just do some more broader questions.
Oh, okay.
A couple broader questions. We'll get back to the story. Do you